Hello everyone. Welcome to 21 Gems of Chess brought to you by Chess Gyaan Academy and Follow Chess app. I'm Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan from Chess Gyaan Academy, and what we are doing in 21 Gems of Chess is a 21-day series on legendary chess players who were exceptionally talented and had the potential to become a world champion. So the game that we are going to be seeing today was played by Grandmaster Efim Bogoljubow against Grandmaster Aron Nimzowitsch. So we all know, a lot about Aron Nimzowitsch. I mean, he's considered to be his My System is very widely read, one of the most popularly read chess book, and very famous. Compared to Aron Nimzowitsch, there is less chess literature or less chess coverage on Efim Bogoljubow. So Efim Bogoljubow is a Russian-born German chess grandmaster, born in Russia, then moved to Germany, and he played two world championship matches against Alexander Alekhine. That's the most important information that we know about Bogoljubow. So he played the world championship match against Alekhine twice, and he also has an opening named after him. If you know about the Bogo Indian defense, it's the Bogo word is taken from Bogoljubow's name. And Bogoljubow was awarded the International Grandmaster title by FIDE in 1951, and so these are the basic information about him. And today the game we're going to be seeing was played in a tournament in Germany in 1925. So let's see how the game started with. White started with d4. So Bogoljubow equally spent his time playing in e4 and d4, so he didn't really have a favorite to say. So in this particular game, he chose d4. Black went knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. So we have a Nimzo Indian on the board. White continued with knight f3, black played b6, and white played queen c2. So this is a kind of a tabia position. There's a lot of different continuations for white and black. I mean, we're just in the starting of the game. Instead of queen c2, quite a few other continuations include moves like g3, bishop d2, queen b3, e3, bishop g5, and so on. Queen c2 is the fourth most popular move. I mean, it makes sense. The simple idea is that if black plays bishop c3, white wants to capture with queen c3 without doubling his pawn. That's the simplest idea behind queen c2. So black went bishop b7. Instead, if black played c5, trying to say that once the queen moved to c2, this d4 pawn is slightly weak, white can simply play d takes c5, b takes c5, go bishop f4, short castle e3, and go rook d1 and try to put pressure on the squares, and a fairly unclear position on the board with a lot of plays still to be played. So what happened is for fifth move queen c2, black went bishop to b7, and a3 was played. Bishop g5 is the move that a lot of games continued like this: h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, knight e4, but that's a separate theoretical line. In this game, white played sixth move a3, black captured, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, and a critical position in my opinion, with different branches of theory including d5, short castle, knight e4. In the game, black went d6. So white played bishop to g5, and this was a new move or a novelty back in the day in 1925. Till then, there had been games which continued, like let's say e3 or g3 or b4, but no, I don't think any game continued with bishop to g5. So for bishop g5, black played knight b d7, e3, and black went knight e4. So if you're watching this game, I would strongly suggest you to pause the video and calculate what happens after bishop d8, knight c3. I mean, is bishop takes c7 playable, or is just like knight e4 just a pawn blunder, or is there like something more to it, and how should white and black react? And once you have made a definite conclusion or some bunch of variations, you can proceed forward watching this video. So now let's look at how white continued for knight e4. So for knight e4, white played bishop takes d8, knight takes c3, and as I mentioned, bishop c7 is a possibility, but it's not a great move, because if bishop c7, black will simply go back knight f4, defending this d6 pawn. And now the threat is rook c8 and trapping the bishop. So white has to find an escape route. So white goes c5, giving back the pawn. And if black plays d takes c5, white can go knight d2, rook c8, knight takes e4, bishop e4, and go bishop d6. But here black can play c takes d4, e d4, and go rook c6, and I feel black will equalize without much of problems, because black can move his knight. Maybe he cannot short castle, but black should be able to move his knight or play f6, king f7, and try to bring his rook on h8 to c8. Not d8 but to c8, and black should be doing fine in those positions. So in the game, noticing this, white did not play bishop takes c7, but instead white went bishop h4, which is a far better move than bishop c7. So if you look at it, I would say white has a slight edge, because one, there's double bishops, and that's the primary reason. The other reason maybe I would feel is white has slightly more space. I mean, pawns on d4, c4. Black can certainly counter it, but there is a symbolic edge for white as of now. But black should be able to equally figure out a way to neutralize that edge if he plays precisely. So black knight on c3 is attacked, so it makes sense he goes back e4. I mean, if you go back a4 or something, knight may be just outright trapped. So knight e4 is the most logical move, and white goes knight d2, so trying to exchange the most active piece of black. And for this, black responded with knight takes d2. But if you, I would suggest the viewers to calculate what happens if g5. If knight d2 is good, or is g5 even better for black? So once you calculate and make a conclusion, then you can proceed and check your variations with the video. So here white has two options for g5. One would be obviously knight e4, and if gh4, go back knight c3. And here black has, even though this is a weakness for now, black can play h3, and after h3 there's a pin. White can only go d5, h2, bishop g2, and it's an equal position with similar minor pieces on the board and so on. So knight e4 doesn't lead anywhere for white. So if in case, let's say white goes bishop g3, black can simply capture knight takes g3, white plays h3, and if black plays something carelessly, let's say just for an example plays c5, white can actively go moves like rook h6 and try to exploit these weak pawns. So what black should do is black should go h5, stopping all those ideas, and if f3, go king e7, and black is fine after king f2. But instead of g5, which should have given black the equality, black made a mistake by going knight takes d2, king takes d2. So from now on, white plays very precisely. I mean, okay, there are one or few mistakes definitely, but the concept with which white increases his advantage is really nice, and something we can learn from in this game. So here black should have just played a5, gain some space on the queen side, stop white from going b4 immediately, and give black an option to exchange rooks down the a file. And a5, bishop g3, then h5, h4, some sort of slightly plus equals position. But instead black went c5. The problem I have with this move is that the d6 pawn becomes extremely weak, and white will get to exploit it in a later stage of the game. So first white plays f3, a brilliant move, because after f3 this bishop scope is reduced drastically, and this also f3 allows white to move his f1 bishop to e2 or d3, develop the bishop. Black goes a5 now, and white goes b3. So white is just kind of waiting to ensure that in case white did not go b3, black may have even considered going a4 and fixing this pawn on b2. That's why b3. The point being, if you go a4 now, white has b4, and then this pawn is kind of weak or standing on its own on a4. So that's the point of b3. So black went f6. So as you would have noticed that black cannot long castle. If he short castles, unfortunately there's bishop e7 and you lose the pawn on d6. That is the reason why black goes f6 here. So white goes bishop d3, black goes king e7, because black realizes that it's an endgame and it would be better to keep the king in the center of the board, as d6 is primarily a big weakness. So here white goes bishop g3, h6. And if you are playing white pieces, what would be the move you would play? Would you go something like rook a c1, or rook f d1, or rook a d1, or some sort of king c3 with idea of b4, or would you do something else? This is a kind of a critical strategic moment in the game, and white plays a beautiful move, and that is h4. So now white has space advantage in the center, and with h4 white now also has space advantage on the king side. And h4 is not just limited to getting a space advantage, but it is about trying to fix this pawn on g7. So black goes rook 8 c8. So now black's idea, if you think about, is to go a4 and then next move go d5 and exchange a lot of pawns on the center of the board and equalize. So once white realizes that a4 is the big threat and that at a4 b4 the c4 pawn is kind of weak, so white immediately goes a4 voluntarily. So now black's idea is stop. Black cannot go, I mean black can still play d5, but d5 isn't that great for black here. So for a4, black goes back rook h8 as his plan did not work out, but now white simply goes h5 and the g7 is a weakness that's fixed. So as you can see, white has consistently improved his pawn placement and has given his pieces new squares with by pushing his pawns forward. So for h5, black goes rook a g8. So what is this move all about? So black wants to break through somewhere in the position, because black cannot simply sit without doing anything here. Let's say it's just bishop c6, bishop b7, something like that. Then white may even coolly improve by going moves like rook h4 and trying to go rook g4 kind of ideas, or trying to go rook a g1 and then move the bishop and then go g4, f4, g5 breakthroughs and so on. So black needs to do something. I mean, there is no scope for any of his piece right now. If you think about, all of them are heavily restricted by white's pawns and white pieces. So black decides that he has to find a way to create some sort of play. So he goes rook a g8. And here, what would white play is a good question, because black's going to, as I earlier mentioned, black is going to go knight f8, and maybe he may even consider going some sort of bishop c6 and then bishop e8, then try to go g5 or g6 kind of break. So white just kind of coolly doesn't care about g5 or g6 for now, because only knight f8. Once that happens, that knight f8, then g6 or g5 is a threat, because now g5 or g6, white will just simply capture a pawn on g6. So white goes king c3, improving the king, and more importantly, removing one of the pieces from the d file, so white can create some threats on the d6 pawn. So if black goes f5, let's say here, then white has the smart move d5 and breaking up the position and black's pawn structure, and then this pawn is going to be weak. So for king c3, we just saw f5. If black goes knight b8, trying to come knight a6 or c6 and try to come b4, white can simply go rook a d1, knight a6 and go back bishop b1. And if rook d8, black trying to defend the d6 pawn, white has an amazing move here, that is rook to h4. So now this is a weakness and this is a weakness, so white is going to target by going rook g4, and if black goes something like rook h8, white will have bishop h7 and attacking the rook. But if black goes something like rook d g8, then you have dc5 and then d6 pawn would be a problem. So black is kind of facing a lot of issues here. So this is on the 21st move if black had played knight b8. In the game though, black went knight f8. So black is now prepared for the g6 g5 pawn break. So for knight b8, white continued with rook a d1, and here black played e5, because black realizes, let's say something like g6 is played, then white can play h takes g6, and if knight takes g6, white can play dc5, and something like bc5 would not be possible, because white can play bishop g6 followed by bishop d6 check and so on. And noticing all this, black first plays e5, trying to make this bishop on g3 kind of like ineffective against the d6 weakness. But when you go e5, and this is kind of the beauty of when you have double bishops, if you're trying to block one bishop with the pawns, you're kind of opening up the other set of squares, colored squares for your other bishop. So when black goes e5, all of a sudden now this is an attractive square for the white bishop f5, and so to control this h3 c8 diagonal. So what white does is, white could have gone bishop f5 immediately, but white first plays d takes e5, and here black plays d takes e5 too, because if f takes e5, then you have problems with bishop h4 kind of check followed by bishop f5 and so on. So for d takes e5, d takes e5, now white goes rook d2. An interesting idea, but not a great idea for white, would be to try to immediately rip open the position with f4. The problem with 24th move f4 is that black can play bishop takes g2. If white goes rook h2, black will go bishop f3, and if bishop e2, bishop takes e2, rook takes e2, and now if ef4, then you can just play e takes f4 with a check, and then the king is kind of stuck, because if king f7, you have a wonderful move in f5, and then you're threatening rook check, and if knight moves, like something like knight h7, you have rook check and bishop d6 and mate and so on. But this position is so beautiful. The rook cannot move, this rook cannot move, king cannot move. It's a perfect zugzwang kind of situation. So for rook takes e2, if black goes g5, then white has f takes e5, knight d7, e takes f6, knight takes f6, bishop c7, 30th move, knight takes h5, bishop d6, and this is an equality unclear position. Pawn wise, white will be able to win one more pawn or maybe even two more, but the point being these two pawns for black are going to run very fast. So g4, g3, so by the time white captures, black may have already generated some sort of play, so it's an equality unclear kind of position, and this is a position that we reached when if white goes 24th move f4 trying to open up the position. Instead, Bogoljubow played a very clean and simple move. He went rook d2. The point of it being, if g5 was played in the game, which was played, then white has ways to get advantage, which we will see. Before that, we'll see what happens if black goes knight e6. Now white can play f4 because the g2 pawn is protected, and if e4, white can go bishop c2, and if rook d8, white will go f5. And rook takes d2, king takes d2, knight g5, white can go bishop c7, and white has an advantage here in the board. So 24th rook d2 is a good move, and black responded with g5, and here hg6 was played, but I think a simpler move than hg6 would have been just simply go bishop f5, and if knight e6, just capture bishop takes e6, king e6, and then go rook hd1, threatening rook d6 check and rook d7 and so on, and winning the material on b6. So white did not go bishop f5 though. White went for a slightly more messier variation, which is h takes g6, knight takes g6, and here white could have simply gone rook hd1 without any counterplay. This would have also been a big advantage. Instead, white played bishop g6, allowing black to play rook g6, and white played rook hd1. So here we are in a critical situation in the board. So if you are playing the black pieces, would strongly suggest you to pause the video, calculate the consequences of capturing rook takes g3. Does black get checkmated, or is rook takes g3 a fine move for black? That's a decision you need to make, and once you made the decision, you can proceed watching this video. In the game, black did not play rook g3, but instead black went bishop c8, but black had to play rook g3. The point being, now if rook d7 check, king e6, rook takes b7, there is rook takes g2, and if white goes something like e4 trying to take away this escape square for the king, black can simply go rook to c8, and black does not have to really worry about getting checkmated because the king escapes in more or less all the variations. So this is a 27 move rook g3, which should have been played by black, and if black had played it, his problems would have been solved. And another interesting option would be something like bishop takes f3, but here this doesn't work because white can simply play gf3, then follow it up with some rook d7 check, rook d6 check, and rook f7, and try to pick up the f6 pawn and so on. So in the game though, black played bishop c8, stopping the d7 check by controlling it, but white simply goes bishop h4, and black went rook f8, white goes g3, so white is now threatening to go e4 and f4 pawn break, or directly f4. So black himself goes e4, f takes e4, bishop g4, and white goes rook f1. So now e5 is a big threat coming up, trying to exploit the spin. So black goes king e6, white goes rook d5 and rook e8, and now white plays a quite little move, rook f2, and black goes bishop h3, and now e5 was played on the board. The point being, if f e5, how does white win, or what is the white's plan here? Calculate that out. The beautiful move that white has here is that because f e5 is played, the h4 d8 diagonal is now open. So what white can do is white can go bishop to d8, and unfortunately black cannot play something like rook g3 because rook f6 checkmate, and if black doesn't capture, white can simply capture all these pawns on b6, e5, a5, and white has a big advantage. So for e5, black went f5, and white played e4, kind of forcing black to play f takes e4, but here also black avoided capturing on e4, and instead black played rook to f8 in this position. So for rook f8, white played rook d6 check, The point being, if you do go king f7, white goes rook fd2, and if rook d6, with which rook or pawn would you capture? Would you capture rook takes d6 or ed6? I think the decision is very simple. You capture with the pawn, because the point being you're going to be threatening e7, d7, d8, and black king cannot really come to e7 as there's a bishop sitting on h4. So ed6, and then the d7 pawn is going to promote to a queen. So for 37th move, rook fd2, black played f takes e4, and now white played rook f2 check, and black resigned because black is losing a rook by force. If he goes something like king g7, you can just play rook g6 check and then capture rook takes f8 and have an extra rook. So as black is losing a rook and he has no other chances after that, Aron Nimzowitsch, playing the black pieces, decided to resign in this particular position. So if we see this game, as I mentioned, the first critical moment of this game was certainly when for knight d2, black would have played g5 and just simply exchanged the bishop, double bishop advantage. Then black should have been doing fine. The other mistake again after that came right away immediately is that black went c5, and you can see how big this turned out to be a problem, because c5 becomes weakens the d6 square. And when you see like near the end of the game, somewhere around move, let's say 30 or so, the whole game was kind of revolving around the fact that this d file was weak. And for example, over here, d5 allowed white to go just rook d2, rook d1, and double on the d file and attack the black pieces and black king. So this move was an unnecessary pawn move that was just weakening. This was a mistake, and white played perfectly with f3. So the other key highlight moves that you can learn from Bogoljubow in this game is playing 18th move h4, and then going also keeping an eye for what black was going to do. So he saw rook at c8, then he went a4, then he went h5. So this h4, a4, h5 on move 18, 19, 20 is a good example of prophylactic thinking, figuring out what your opponent is planning to do. Also at the same time, you're improving your own position, pawn structure, and giving your pieces better squares. Because of h4, h5 only, you have ideas like rook h4, rook g4, which would not have previously existed if the pawn continued to remain on h2. So a good kind of thinking there by Bogoljubow. And then obviously the biggest chance that came later on for black was on move 27, where black had to risk with rook takes g3. So this is, I think, a good moment to understand or kind of realize that when you are defending, if your opponent gives you a critical variation where you can, let's say, capture a piece or capture some extra material, and your opponent has to prove himself that he can make let's say a win, then you should go for it and ask your opponent to prove the whatever variation he has calculated, instead of trying to passively defend with bishop c8. Because when you go move like bishop c8, you're kind of understood that you're just playing moves for the sake of playing. Maybe you won't have any practical defensive resources in the long run. Maybe what black could have been afraid of instead of bishop c8 is maybe rook g3, rook d7, king e6, and he would have maybe thought if e4, then it's going to be a mate in one as white is threatening. But here black can play bishop takes e4, and then using this pin, black will just simply escape and black will have an extra piece. Maybe this is the variation that Aron Nimzowitsch did not calculate deeply, or he was more worried about something like rook takes b7. But both those variations, the black king escapes without getting checkmated. So this would have been a good way to get an equal or close, very unclear position. But instead black missed that opportunity, and then white really did not give black any other opportunity to get back into the game, and white just simply won the game after that. So so these were the key takeaways for us from this game. And other critical things that I would mention is that you know like it's very important to study games of masters, and that's what we are doing with this 21 gems of chess series, because a lot of these players are the ones whose idea are being used in the same exact form or slightly modified form in the modern days. I mean, these are the players who kind of started the trend of hypermodernism in chess and so on. So when you see the games, you can easily make connections to modern ideas that are being played and how these players developed those ideas back in the day. I'm talking about close to 100 years ago, 110 years ago. That is why it becomes critical to study games of old masters. And So what we just saw is the series 21 Gems of Chess, brought to you by Chess Gyaan Academy and Follow Chess app. If you're interested in watching the previous day games, because we're already now, I believe, on day 13 of this 21 day episode. So if you want to watch the previous 12 games, you can watch all of them in Follow Chess app with PGN. If you're interested in watching them with the video part, would strongly suggest you to check out the Chess Gyaan YouTube channel, where you can subscribe and get the updates of all the chess content. That the chess content is not just limited to this series 21 Gems of Chess. You can see other chess content of other historic players, modern players, and a lot of new content has been regularly added. So definitely go check out the Chess Gyaan YouTube channel and subscribe to the channel. So that's all from me, Grandmaster Priyadharshan Kannappan. So tomorrow I'll come back with another legendary player's game, and we'll analyze that game in depth. So everyone stay home, stay safe, and we are more or less done with 2 weeks of lockdown that the government has announced. So yeah, everyone, bye bye. This is Grandmaster Priyadarshan signing off.